Hi, this is Dorian with Strumpatterns.com, and welcome to another video in the Beginner's Music Theory series. In this lesson, we're going to talk about what are scales. In the previous video, we looked at what is a note and what is a pitch. And the main thing to have taken away from that video is that there's an infinite range of sound possibility out there. However, in music, we limit ourselves to a very narrow number of pitches. So within a certain range, we will only have 12 possible notes. And one last thing before we move on, and that is if you actually asked musicians what's the difference between a note and a pitch, and what you'll actually find is that the two words are used completely interchangeably. In the first lesson, we talked about using different scales to accompany either a storm or a sunny day, but we didn't actually talk about what a scale is, so let's fix that. In this video, we're only going to look at what scales are and how they are used in general. However, in future videos, we'll look at the details of individual scales. Now that we know what a note is, we can talk about what a scale is. And a scale is when we limit ourselves to a certain collection of possible notes. So a song often won't use all the possible notes, and it may repeat a note several times as well as skip around from one note to another. A scale, however, is the collection of notes where each different note is represented once and only once, and then arranged in order from lowest sounding note to the highest. So most of your scales are going to be made up of 7 or 5 different of the 12 possible notes. However, other scales do exist. There are 6 and 8 and 9 note and so on scales, but they're certainly less common. So I've already talked about music as language, and I love that metaphor. Another metaphor that I love for music is music as a visual art. Just like an artist will select a collection of colors and only paint using that collection of colors, musicians can also do the same thing by choosing specific scales. So the choice of color palette that a painter uses will have an immense effect on the visual impact of their painting. Here's an example of a monochromatic painting, meaning one color, by Picasso. It's called The Old Guitarist. And notice how everything in this painting is pretty much blue, with the exception of some of the muted browns in the guitar and on the floor. This is almost completely blues. That lack of other colors really dominates this painting and really contributes to its impact in the lack of life, the lack of vibrance that we feel when viewing this. And that was very intentional. That's what he wanted, I believe, the viewer to feel, is that coldness and that lack of life. If he added more colors to it, it would become more vibrant, more alive, and that would kill the effect of this particular painting. In contrast is this image here. It too is monochromatic. It's only reds and yellows, and it has the opposite effect. It's very vibrant, very full of life. So even though they're both monochromatic, they have very different impacts on us because of which color they have chosen to use. So moving along, here's an example that has more colors present. Yeah, you have multiple reds, greens, blues, purples, and things like that, but there's still the same kind of brightness factor to them. You don't have like a subdued drab green, drab yellow, and then a vibrant red and a vibrant purple. They all have a similar saturation or brightness to them. So that is a unifying feature here. And even though there are multiple colors here, we can still distinguish them well from each other. Here in this picture, we have just an absolute mess of colors, and this is an example I created, and to my eye, this is hideous, and I think part of the reason why this is so ugly is because it has so many colors present that they fight each other, and each color loses meaning because of all the surrounding competing colors, and we don't know what to look at, what's more important, what's less important. So as artists will choose very carefully the selection of colors they want in order to have a specific impact on their viewer. So musicians want to have an impact on their listeners. So too, they will limit themselves by selecting specific scales for specific tasks. Now we'll listen to some different scales. The first one we're going to listen to is one that should be familiar to most of us, and that's the major scale. And that was the major scale, and you might have noticed it's a fairly bright sounding scale. Some people will call it happy, and that might be a decent way of describing it, but I tend to stay away from emotions like happy and sad, and even though they often will make the listener feel those ways, Sometimes you can use a major scale in a way that will still make someone feel sad, or you can make a minor scale not sound quite so sad. I tend to stay a little bit away from those emotional terms and favor light and dark, but you may choose to do differently. That's just the way I do it. This next scale will be Dorian, and you'll notice it'll have a darker sound to it, and it belongs to the minor family of scales. And for our last example, we'll listen to the Palog scale. And this scale is not traditionally found in Western music, and it has a bit of an exotic sound to our ears. And that's it for this video, but it's not the end of the video series, so be sure to click here to catch the next video in the series. Also, click here if you'd like to catch the very first video in the series. If you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, click here so that you don't miss out on future videos. Leave any questions or comments you have down below. Also, you could follow me on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter by clicking here. And if you'd like to support me and keep these videos coming, you can click here to make a donation. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video, and thank you for watching.